The champagne glasses were raised, the orchestra was playing our song, and 500 guests were watching as I stood at the altar of Grandview Country Club, waiting to marry the woman I'd loved for 6 years. What I didn't know was that in exactly 47 minutes, I would discover a betrayal so devastating it would shatter everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the people closest to me. But here's the twist: instead of breaking me, it would become the catalyst for the most satisfying revenge I've ever witnessed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of October 15th started like every groom's dream. I woke up in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house in Beaverton, sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd had since high school. My shoulder ached slightly, a permanent reminder of the car accident 2 years ago when I'd thrown myself across Emma to shield her from the drunk driver who T-boned us. The doctor said I'd probably never regain full mobility in my left arm. But seeing Emma walk away without a scratch made every moment of physical therapy worth it. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, my best friend since college. "Big day, brother. Ready to become a married man?" I couldn't help but smile. Tyler had been my rock through the recovery, driving me to appointments when Emma was busy with work, bringing me takeout when I was too depressed to cook. He'd even been the one to suggest I propose to Emma once I was back on my feet, claiming she deserved to know how much I appreciated her sticking by me during the darkest period of my life. The irony wasn't lost on me now, but back then, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. Emma and I had met during our senior year at Portland State University. She was everything I wasn't: confident, ambitious. From a family that owned the most successful real estate company in the Pacific Northwest, I was a middle-class kid majoring in marketing, working 3 part-time jobs to afford textbooks. When she agreed to go out with me after I'd awkwardly asked her for coffee in the library, I felt like I'd won the lottery. Our relationship had its challenges. Emma's parents, Robert and Patricia Hayes, never quite warmed up to me. During family dinners, they'd make subtle comments about Emma's potential and how important it was for her to marry someone who could match her ambition. But Emma always defended me, telling them that love mattered more than social status. After the accident, when I was worried she might leave me for someone whole, she held my good hand and promised she'd never abandon me. The wedding planning had been Emma's domain. She wanted everything perfect: 500 guests, the most exclusive venue in Portland, a reception that would be talked about for years. I went along with it all, figuring it was her day and she deserved everything she'd dreamed of. Tyler was my best man, of course, and he seemed almost as excited as I was about the whole affair. Standing in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting my tie with my good arm while my father helped with the cufflinks, I felt a surge of gratitude. Despite everything we'd been through, despite my limitations, Emma had chosen me. In a few hours, I'd be Ryan Mitchell, husband to the most beautiful woman in Portland. The Grandview Country Club was transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses and baby's breath adorned every surface. In the autumn afternoon light, filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in a golden glow. Guests were arriving in designer suits and elegant dresses, many of them Emma's. Fathers, business associates, and high society friends. I recognized maybe a quarter of the people there. Should have been my first red flag, but I was too nervous and excited to think clearly. Tyler found me in the groom's suite, looking sharp in his charcoal gray tuxedo. "Clean up nice." "Mitchell," he said, straightening my boutonniere with the same gentle touch he'd used when helping me with physical therapy exercises. "Emma's not going to know what hit her." Something in his voice was different that day, though I couldn't place it. There was an intensity in his eyes, a tension in his movements that seemed out of character for my usually laid-back friend. When I mentioned it, he laughed it off, claiming wedding nerves were contagious. The ceremony was set to begin at 4 o'clock. By 3:30, I was positioned at the altar with Pastor Williams, watching as the country club's grand ballroom filled with guests. The orchestra began the processional music, and Emma's bridesmaids began their elegant walk down the aisle. Each one looked stunning, but I barely noticed them. My eyes were fixed on the back of the room, waiting for my first glimpse of Emma in her wedding dress. When the bridal march began, the entire room rose to their feet. Emma appeared in the doorway, and for a moment, time stopped. She was radiant in her ivory silk gown, grandmother's pearl necklace catching the light, her veil flowing behind her like something from a dream. Her father, Robert, walked beside her with the pride of a man who'd built an empire and was now watching his greatest achievement take the next step in her journey. But as Emma walked down that seemingly endless aisle, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. Her eyes weren't on me. They kept darting to the front row, where Tyler stood as my best man. And when she looked at him, her expression softened in a way I'd never seen before. Not even on our most intimate nights together. The ceremony proceeded, exactly as we'd rehearsed. Pastor Williams spoke about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. Emma and I exchanged the vows we'd written, promising to love each other through sickness and health, for better or worse. When she spoke about standing by me during my recovery, her voice trembled with what I thought was emotion. Now I realize it was probably guilt. We reached the moment everyone was waiting for, the exchange of rings. I'd spent months saving for Emma's wedding band, a custom piece with diamonds that matched her engagement ring. It represented every overtime hour I'd worked, every sacrifice I'd made to give her something worthy of her beauty. Pastor Williams smiled at the crowd and began the familiar words, "Ryan, please place the ring on Emma's finger and repeat after me." But as I reached for Emma's hand, she pulled it back. The gesture was so sudden, so unexpected, that a murmur rippled through the crowd. Emma's face had gone pale. She was staring at Tyler with an expression I'd never seen before. Desperate, longing, terrified. "I need a moment," she whispered. But in the perfect acoustics of the country club, her words carried to every corner. "Of the room, Emma?" I asked, confusion replacing the joy I'd felt just seconds before. She turned to face the 500 guests, all of whom were now sitting forward in their chairs, sensing drama. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I can't do this. Not like this." The murmur from the crowd grew louder. I could see Emma's mother, Patricia, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles were white, while her father, Robert's face was turning an alarming shade of red. My own parents looked mortified, my mother covering her mouth with her hands. Emma stepped closer to Tyler, and that's when I saw the look that passed between them. It wasn't the look of friends. It was the look of lovers who'd been hiding their feelings for far too long. "Tyler," Emma said, her voice breaking, "you told me once that if I ever realized what we had was real, you'd be waiting. Are you still waiting?" The country club fell silent, except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Tyler stepped forward, no longer the loyal best man, but something else entirely. He took Emma's hands in his, the hands that should have been wearing my ring. "I've been waiting for 6 years, Em," he said softly. "I've been waiting since the day you chose him over me." Revelation hit me like another car accident, but this time there was no protective instinct, no heroic gesture. This time I was just the obstacle standing between two people who apparently belonged together. Emma turned to me, tears streaming down her face, but not tears of regret, tears of relief. "Ryan, I'm so sorry. You're a good man, and you deserved better than someone who was never fully yours. Tyler and I, we tried to stay away from each other. We tried to respect what you and I had, but we can't keep pretending anymore." 500 guests sat in stunned silence, waiting to see how the jilted groom would react. Would I make a scene? Would I beg? Would I fight for the woman who was supposed to be my wife? Instead, I surprised everyone, including myself. I smiled. "Emma," I said calmly, "if Tyler makes you happy, then you should be with him." The crowd seemed to exhale collectively, perhaps expecting the tension to dissolve into one of those romantic comedy moments where everyone realizes love conquers all. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly known, was that my smile wasn't born of nobility or understanding. It was born of something much darker. Because in that moment of ultimate betrayal, standing in front of 500 witnesses to what should have been the happiest day of my life, I realized I'd been blind to signs that had been right in front of me for years. And as Emma and Tyler embraced, as our guests whispered and shifted uncomfortably in their seats, I began planning something that would make this moment look like a minor inconvenience. They thought they knew Ryan Mitchell, the nice guy, the pushover, the man who'd gracefully step aside for true love. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. The real show was only just beginning. The aftermath of the wedding disaster felt like being trapped underwater while everyone else continued breathing normally above the surface. As Emma and Tyler left the altar together, heading toward the country club's exit, like some twisted version of a fairy tale ending, I remained standing there in my expensive tuxedo, watching 500 guests process what they'd just witnessed. Pastor Williams cleared his throat awkwardly, his prepared closing remarks now completely useless. Perhaps we should take a moment too. He began, but his voice trailed off as he realized there were no words for this situation in any wedding handbook. My mother, Linda, was the first to break from her shock. She stood up from the front row, her navy dress pristine, but her face streaked with mascara tears, and marched toward me with the determination of a woman whose perfect family image had just been shattered in the most public way possible. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ryan Michael Mitchell, she hissed, using my full name the way she had when I was 10 and had broken her favorite lamp. What did you just do? The question caught me off guard. What had I done? I'd been gracious. I'd been understanding. I'd let the woman I loved walk away with my best friend, rather than causing a scene that would have made everyone even more uncomfortable than they already were. Mom, I started, but she cut me off with a sharp gesture. Do you have any idea what this looks like? Do you understand that Emma's father invited half of Portland's business community to this wedding? These people don't want to see drama, Ryan. They want to see success, stability, the kind of match that makes sense. Her voice was getting louder, and I could feel the remaining guests turning their attention from the departed couple to this new spectacle. Linda, please, my father David said, approaching us with his hands raised in a placating gesture. Let's not make this worse than it already is. Worse? My mother's voice cracked. Our son just let his bride run off with another man in front of 500 people, and you think it could get worse? That's when Robert Hayes, Emma's father, decided to join the conversation. Robert was a man who'd built his real estate empire by being tougher and more ruthless than his competition. And the look in his eyes told me he was about to treat me like a problematic property that needed to be demolished. Ryan, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making million-dollar decisions without hesitation. I think we need to have a conversation, privately. He gestured toward a small conference room off the main ballroom, and I found myself following him like a man walking toward his own execution. My parents trailed behind us, along with Patricia Hayes, Emma's mother, who looked like she was calculating exactly how much money had been wasted on this disaster. Once the door closed behind us, Robert's composure cracked. What the hell was that, son? You just stood there and let my daughter walk away. Do you have any idea what people are going to say about our family after this? With all due respect. Mr. Hayes, I said, finding my voice for the first time since the ceremony imploded. Your daughter made her choice. I wasn't going to drag her down the aisle kicking and screaming. Choice. Patricia Hayes laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ryan, honey, this wasn't a choice. This was Emma getting cold feet and making a mistake that you should have handled like a man. The word mistake hit me like a physical blow. After 6 years together, after nursing me through my recovery, after planning this entire wedding, Patricia was calling Emma's moment of truth a mistake that I should have corrected. She didn't look like she was making a mistake, I said quietly. She looked like she was finally telling the truth. My mother gasped, as if I'd said something blasphemous. Ryan, you saved that girl's life. She owes you everything. Which is about commitment, not feelings that come and go like the weather. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with both sets of parents tag-teaming me with arguments about duty, commitment, and social expectations. They painted Emma as a confused young woman who'd been overwhelmed by wedding jitters, and Tyler as a manipulative friend who'd taken advantage of a vulnerable moment. According to them, the solution was simple. I needed to go after Emma, bring her back, and convince her to honor the commitment she'd made. But as they talked, all I could think about was the look in Emma's eyes when she'd taken Tyler's hands. It wasn't confusion or fear or temporary insanity. It was relief. It was joy. It was the look of someone who'd finally stopped pretending. When I left that conference room, most of the guests had already departed. The country club staff were beginning to clean up the reception. That would never happen. Boxing up the custom centerpieces and storing the 5-tier wedding cake that would never be cut. I found myself walking through the empty ballroom, past the dance floor where Emma and I were supposed to have had our first dance as husband and wife. Marcus Chen, my colleague from Northwest Marketing Solutions, was one of the few people still lingering. He approached me cautiously, as if I might shatter if he spoke too loudly. "Ryan, man, I don't know what to say. He shook his head, searching for words. "Humiliating?" supplied. "I was going to say honest," Marcus replied. "Look, I know this sucks, but maybe it's better that it happened now rather than after you'd been married for 10 years with kids." His words made sense logically, but they didn't ease the ache in my chest or answer the questions that were starting to form in my mind. How long had Emma and Tyler been feeling this way about each other? Had there been signs I'd missed? Had I been living in a fantasy while they'd been struggling with their real feelings? The drive home was surreal. My rental car still had tin cans tied to the bumper and "just married" written on the back window in washable paint. Other drivers honked and waved at me, offering congratulations for a marriage that had lasted exactly 47 minutes. When I got home to the apartment Emma and I shared in downtown Portland, her absence was immediately obvious. Her closet was half empty and many of her personal items were gone. She'd planned this, I realized. This wasn't a spur-of-a-moment decision at the altar. She'd been preparing to leave me even as she was planning our wedding. I found a note on our kitchen counter, written in Emma's careful handwriting. "Ryan, I know you must hate me right now, and I don't blame you. I tried so hard to be the woman you deserved, but I can't keep pretending that what we have is enough. Tyler and I never meant for this to happen. We fought against it for years because we both care about you too much to hurt you, but we can't keep living a lie. I hope someday you'll understand that this is better for everyone. I'll always be grateful for what you did for me in the accident, but gratitude isn't love, and you deserve someone who loves you completely. I'm sorry." Emma, I read the note 3 times before the full implications hit me. She'd said Tyler. And I never meant for this to happen, and that they'd been fighting against it for years. Years, not months. Not weeks, years. That's when I started thinking about all the times Tyler had been conveniently available when Emma was busy. All the times he'd known her schedule better than I had. All the times he'd been the one to comfort me when Emma seemed distant or distracted. He hadn't been my supportive best friend during my recovery. He'd been spending time with Emma while I was stuck in physical therapy. My phone started ringing almost immediately. First my parents, demanding to know if I'd talked to Emma yet. Then Emma herself, her voice tearful and apologetic, asking if we could meet to talk things through. Then Tyler, sounding guilty and defensive, insisting that what happened at the wedding wasn't planned and that they needed to explain everything properly. But I didn't want explanations. I wanted evidence. I spent the next 3 hours going through Emma's laptop, which she'd left behind. In her hasty departure, her browser history told a story of secret research into apartments Tyler could afford, restaurants where they could meet without being seen, and most damning of all, travel websites showing romantic getaways for two. Her email account revealed the full scope of their relationship. Messages dating back almost 2 years, starting innocent enough but gradually becoming more intimate, more desperate, more consumed with their need to be together. They'd been careful never to explicitly mention physical affairs, but the emotional infidelity was undeniable. One email from Tyler, dated just 3 weeks before our wedding, particularly caught my attention. "I can't keep watching you plan a future with him when we both know where your heart really is. After the wedding, we need to make a decision. Love you too much to keep being your secret." Emma's response was equally revealing. "I know this is killing you, and it's killing me too. Ryan has sacrificed so much for me and his family. Has been so accepting. How can I destroy him after everything he's been through? Maybe after we're married, these feelings will fade, and we can go back to being just friends. Tyler's final message in that thread was the most devastating. Feelings like this don't fade, Emma. They only get stronger. And Ryan deserves better than a wife who's thinking about another man on her wedding day. Reading those words, I realized Tyler had been right about one thing. I did deserve better. But what he and Emma had failed to understand was that better didn't mean settling for a woman who stayed with me out of obligation. It meant finding someone who chose me not because I'd saved her life, but because she genuinely wanted to build a life with me. The next morning brought a parade of visitors. Emma's parents arrived first, Patricia carrying a fruit basket, as if this were a bereavement call. They sat in my living room, Robert in his perfectly pressed suit, and Patricia in her designer dress, looking like they were conducting a business meeting rather than discussing the collapse of their daughter's wedding. "Ryan," Robert began, "Patricia and I have been talking, and we think there's a way to fix this situation. Emma's young, and young people make mistakes, but mistakes can be corrected." Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "Honey, Emma called us this morning. She's staying at Tyler's apartment, but she's having second thoughts. She realizes what she's thrown away, and she wants to make things right." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Emma was having second thoughts not because she'd realized she loved me, but because she'd realized the social and financial implications of her choice. The Hayes family had built their reputation on stability and success, and having their daughter run off with the best man at her own wedding was exactly the kind of scandal that could damage their business relationships. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Robert leaned forward, his businessman instincts taking over. "We rescheduled the wedding. Small ceremony this time, family only. We tell people that yesterday was a case of pre-wedding jitters that got blown out of proportion. Emma comes home, you two have a proper honeymoon, and in 6 months, everyone will have forgotten this ever happened." The plan was so calculated, so devoid of any consideration for actual emotions or relationships that I finally understood why Emma had run. She'd been raised to think of marriage as a business arrangement, a strategic alliance between families rather than a union between two people who couldn't imagine life without each other. "And Tyler?" I asked. Patricia waved, her hand dismissively. "Tyler will be dealt with. He took advantage of Emma's vulnerability, and there will be consequences for that. Robert has already spoken to some people at his company about his future prospects in this city, so they were planning to destroy Tyler professionally while forcing Emma back into a marriage she'd already rejected once." The Hayes family approach to problem-solving was apparently to eliminate obstacles and manipulate outcomes until reality matched their preferences. After they left, I called in sick to work and spent the day walking around Portland, trying to process everything that had happened. By evening, I'd made a decision that surprised even me. I wasn't going to fight for Emma. I wasn't going to beg her to come back or promise to change or pretend that what we'd had was worth salvaging. Instead, I was going to let her go completely along with Tyler and everyone else who thought I should be grateful for scraps of affection and loyalty. But first, I was going to make sure that everyone who'd witnessed my humiliation at the Grandview Country Club understood exactly what kind of people they'd been cheering for. The real Ryan Mitchell was about to make his debut. It's a breaking point. Came exactly 1 week after the wedding disaster, delivered in the most unexpected way possible. I was sitting in my apartment, eating cereal for dinner and reviewing the evidence I'd compiled about Emma and Tyler's affair, when my doorbell rang at 8:30 in the evening. I opened the door to find my parents standing there with Emma. Beside them, she looked exhausted, her usually perfect appearance replaced by dark circles under her eyes and hair that hadn't seen a professional stylist in days. But what struck me most was the expression on her face, not remorse or longing, but the look of someone who'd been cornered and was being forced to perform a task she despised. "Ryan," my mother announced, pushing past me into the apartment. Like she owned the place. "We're here to fix this mess once and for all." Emma followed reluctantly, avoiding my eyes as she perched on the edge of the couch where we'd spent countless evenings, watching movies and planning our future together. My father closed the door behind him and stood with his arms crossed, clearly prepared for battle. "Son," he began, using the tone he'd employed when I was 16 and had wrecked his car. Your mother and I have been talking to Emma, and we all agree that this situation has gone on long enough. What situation would that be? I asked, genuinely curious to hear how they'd framed the complete destruction of my relationship in their minds. Emma finally looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes: anger. Not guilt, not sadness, but genuine irritation. That I wasn't playing along with whatever script they'd written for this reunion. Ryan, can we please stop pretending this is some grand tragedy? She said, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. We dated for 6 years. We got engaged. I made a mistake at the wedding, and now I'm here to fix it. Can't we just move forward? Like adults. The casual dismissal of everything we'd built together as a mistake hit me harder than I'd expected. But what followed was even worse. My mother sat down beside Emma and took her hand like they were old friends conspiring together. Honey, tell him what you told us about Tyler. Emma sighed as if she were being asked to recite multiplication tables. Tyler took advantage of my pre-wedding nerves. He's always had feelings for me, and he chose the worst possible moment to confess them. I was overwhelmed and confused, and I made a terrible decision. But I realize now that what Tyler and I thought we had was just nostalgia, friendship that got complicated because we were both scared about the future. It was such a perfectly rehearsed explanation, so carefully crafted to minimize her agency and paint Tyler as the manipulative villain, that I almost applauded. But then I remembered the emails I'd found, the ones where Emma had been the one pushing for secret meetings and romantic getaways. And where's Tyler now? I asked. Gone, my father said with satisfaction. Robert Hayes had a conversation with his employer. Turns out that kind of behavior doesn't reflect well on a company's values. Tyler's been let go and is apparently moving back to Seattle to stay with family. So Tyler had been eliminated as a problem, his career destroyed, and his life uprooted, all to clear the path for Emma's return to me. The efficiency of it was almost impressive, if it wasn't so morally repugnant. Emma, I said carefully, when you were standing at that altar telling Tyler you'd been waiting for him to be ready, were you lying then, or are you lying now? Her composure cracked for just a moment, and I saw a flash of the real Emitha, one who'd been suffocating under the weight of everyone's expectations for years. But then, the mask slid back into place, and she became the dutiful daughter and penitent fiancée once again. I was confused and scared, she repeated. But I'm not confused anymore. I know what I want, and I want to marry you, Ryan, if you'll have me. My mother beamed as if Emma had just delivered the most romantic declaration in history. Isn't that wonderful, Ryan? Emma's come to her senses, and you two can start planning a proper wedding. Something small and tasteful, maybe in the spring. The surreal nature of the conversation was starting to make me feel dizzy. They were all acting as if Emma's public declaration of love for another man had been some minor social gaffe that could be corrected with the right apology and a do-over ceremony. And what happens to Tyler? I asked. Emma's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. What happens to Tyler is none of our concern anymore. He made his choice when he tried to sabotage our wedding. The cold dismissal of a man she'd claimed to. Love just a week earlier told me everything I needed to know about Emma's capacity for genuine emotion. Tyler hadn't sabotaged anything, he'd simply given her the courage to be honest about feelings they'd both been harboring for years. But now that honesty was inconvenient, Tyler had been transformed into a villain whose destruction was not only acceptable, but necessary. My father stepped forward, his expression serious. Ryan, I'm going to be direct with you, because I think you need to hear this. Emma comes from a good family, a wealthy family. A family with connections that could help your career in ways you can't even imagine right now. This isn't just about love, it's about building a life that gives you opportunities you'd never have otherwise. There it was, finally spoken out loud. It's a real reason everyone was so invested in getting Emma and me back together. It wasn't about my happiness or even Emma's. It was about the social and economic advantages that came with being part of the Hayes family dynasty. Are you suggesting I should marry Emma for her money? I asked. My mother looked horrified that I'd stated it so bluntly. Ryan, don't be crude. We're talking about partnership, about building something together that's bigger than just romance. Romance fades, Emma added. her voice taking on the practical tone she used when discussing real estate investments. But partnership, shared goals, mutual respect, those things last. And we have all of that, Ryan. We always have. I looked at the three of them sitting in my living room, united in their conviction that I should be grateful for this opportunity. To salvage something from the wreckage of my wedding day, they'd worked out all the details, eliminated all the obstacles. And now they were waiting for me to sign on the dotted line, like Emma was a business merger, instead of the woman I'd planned to spend my life with. I need some time to think about this, I said finally. My mother's face fell. Think about what? Emma is offering you everything you wanted. Don't overthink this. But Emma was already standing up, smoothing down her dress with the efficient movements of someone who'd accomplished what she'd come to do. It's fine, Linda. Let him think. But Ryan, don't take too long. I won't wait forever, and there are other men who would appreciate what I'm offering. The threat was delivered with a smile, but it was unmistakably a threat. Emma was giving me a deadline to accept her terms, and if I didn't comply, she'd find someone else who would. After they left, I sat in my apartment feeling like I'd just survived a corporate takeover attempt. Everything they'd said made perfect logical sense from their perspective. Emma was beautiful, successful, and from a prominent family. I was ordinary, middle class, and damaged from my accident. By their calculations, I should be thrilled that she was willing to overlook my limitations and offer me a second chance. But there was one thing they'd all failed to consider. I'd already seen what Emma looked like when she was genuinely happy. It wasn't when she was with me. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Marcus Chin from work was calling to warn me about something he'd overheard in the office. Ryan, I don't know how to tell you this, but Emma Hayes was here yesterday morning talking to Johnson about your position. Johnson was our department head, and the idea of Emma discussing my career without my knowledge sent a chill down my spine. What kind of discussion? Marcus's voice was uncomfortable. She was asking about your performance reviews, your future prospects with the company, that kind of thing. But Ryan, the way she was talking, it sounded like she was evaluating whether you were worth investing in. After I hung up, I realized that Emma's visit to my apartment hadn't been an attempt at reconciliation. It had been a final assessment, like a real estate appraiser determining whether a property was worth renovating or should be demolished and rebuilt from scratch. That afternoon, I received a text from Emma. Have you made your decision? Tyler called me last night from Seattle. He wants me to join him there, start fresh somewhere new. But I told him I'm committed to making things work with you. Don't make me regret that choice. The manipulation was so blatant, it was almost insulting. Emma was using Tyler as leverage, implying that I was competing for her attention and should be grateful for her preference. But what she didn't realize was that she'd just given me crucial information. Tyler was willing to take her, career destruction and all, while I was being asked to accept her as damaged goods that came with conditions and expectations. I spent the rest of the day walking through downtown Portland, past the restaurants where Emma and I had shared meals, shops where we'd browsed for wedding decorations, the park where I'd proposed to her 2 years earlier. I saw reminders of a relationship that had apparently been built on foundations I'd never understood. By evening, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to play the role of the grateful second choice who should be thrilled to marry a woman who'd publicly declared her love for someone else. I wasn't going to pretend that a marriage based on social expectations and financial considerations was the same thing as a partnership built on genuine love and mutual respect. But I also wasn't going to quietly fade away while Emma and Tyler eventually found their way back to each other. And my parents continued to treat me like a disappointment who'd thrown away his one chance at social advancement. I was going to make sure that everyone who'd participated in this elaborate charade understood exactly what they'd been asking me to accept. And I was going to do it in a way that would make Emma's wedding day confession look like a minor embarrassment. The plan that began forming in my mind was audacious. It's potentially career-ending, and absolutely certain to burn every bridge I'd built in Portland. But for the first time since standing at that altar a week ago, I felt genuinely excited about my future. Emma wanted to play games with people's emotions and use social pressure to force outcomes that benefited her. Tyler wanted to destroy my life and then disappear when the consequences became uncomfortable. My parents wanted to treat me like a commodity to be traded for social status. They were all about to discover that the nice guy they'd been manipulating had finally decided to stop being nice. The opportunity for perfect revenge presented itself 3 weeks later in the form of an engraved invitation that arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday morning. Hayes & Associates Real Estate was hosting their annual charity gala at the Portland Art Museum, a black tie affair that brought together the city's most influential business leaders, politicians, and socialites. The event raised money for local children's hospitals while providing a showcase for the Hayes family's philanthropic image and business connections. Emma's handwritten note was tucked inside the formal invitation. "Ryan, I hope you'll consider attending as my guest. It would mean a lot to have your support during this important evening for our family's foundation. We could use this as an opportunity to show everyone that we're moving forward together. Love, Emma." The timing was perfect. Emma was clearly hoping to use the gala as a public relations opportunity, a chance to demonstrate to Portland's elite that the wedding disaster had been resolved, and that the Hayes family's reputation remained intact. She wanted me there as a prop in her carefully orchestrated image rehabilitation, but I had different plans entirely. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing with the methodical precision of a military strategist planning a campaign. First, I contacted every local news outlet and gossip blog, anonymously tipping them off that there might be an interesting development at the Hayes Charity Gala. I didn't provide specifics, just enough information to ensure that photographers and reporters would be positioned strategically throughout the museum. Next, I reached out to Tyler in Seattle. Conversation was awkward at first, both of us dancing around the elephant in the room of his affair with my former fiancée. But when I explained what Emma and her family had done to his career, how they'd systematically destroyed his professional reputation to clear the path for her return to me, his attitude shifted dramatically. "They told everyone at the firm that I was unstable," Tyler said, his voice bitter with resentment. "That I had a history of inappropriate relationships with clients' family members. Robert Hayes made sure I'd never work in marketing in this city again. And Emma knew about this?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "She was the one who suggested it," Tyler replied. "She said it was the only way to convince you that what we had was just a temporary mistake. She promised that once you two were remarried, she'd help me find a position in Seattle. But Ryan, she hasn't returned a single one of my calls since I moved here." Tyler's revelation was the final piece I needed. She'd used Tyler's genuine feelings for her as a weapon to destroy his life, then discarded him when he was no longer useful. The woman I'd planned to marry was capable of a level of manipulation that would have impressed a corporate raider. "Tyler," I said carefully, "would you be interested in setting the record straight about what really happened between you and Emma?" The night of the gala, I arrived at the Portland Art Museum looking better than I had in years. I'd bought a new tuxedo, gotten a professional haircut, and spent the afternoon at a spa dealing with the stress lines that had appeared around my eyes since the wedding. If I was going to destroy my former life publicly, I was going to look good doing it. Emma was radiant in a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She greeted me at the entrance with a smile that was equal parts genuine pleasure and calculated relief. Having me there, looking presentable and playing the role of supportive boyfriend, was clearly a weight off her shoulders. "Look amazing," she said, linking her arm through mine as we entered the museum's grand hall. "I'm so glad you decided to come." The charity gala was exactly what I'd expected. Carefully choreographed display of wealth and social consciousness that allowed Portland's elite to feel good about themselves while networking and making business connections. Emma guided me through the crowd like a politician's wife, introducing me to judges, city council members, real estate developers, and other influential figures who made up the Hayes family's social circle. Everyone was gracious about the wedding incident, treating it like a minor social hiccup that had been appropriately resolved. Several people commented on how mature Emma and I had been to work through our differences, and how refreshing it was to see young people who understood that real relationships required commitment and compromise, Robert and Patricia Hayes were playing their roles perfectly as well, treating me like the prodigal son who'd finally come to his senses. Robert even pulled me aside at one point to discuss potential business opportunities, suggesting that there might be a place for someone. With my marketing background in their organization, Emma speaks very highly of your creative abilities, he said, his hand heavy on my shoulder. We could use fresh thinking in our advertising campaigns. By 9 o'clock, the evening's formal program was ready to begin. Emma had been selected to present the Foundation's annual report, a speech highlighting the charity's accomplishments and introducing the major donors who'd made their work possible. It was a perfect opportunity for her to demonstrate her poise, intelligence, and commitment to community service, exactly the kind of public relations victory she needed after the wedding debacle. As Emma took the stage, I excused myself from our table and walked toward the museum's main entrance. The speech was being broadcast live on the museum's social media channels, and I knew that what happened next would be captured and shared across every platform in the city within minutes. Tyler was waiting in the lobby, looking nervous, but determined in a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit his frame. He'd driven down from Seattle that afternoon, armed with printed copies of every email, text message, and social media post that documented his relationship with Emma over the past 2 years. Are you sure about this? He asked as we walked back toward the main hall. Emma made her choice when she decided to destroy your life to protect her reputation, I replied. Now it's time for everyone to understand who they've been celebrating. We entered the hall just as Emma was reaching the climax of her speech, talking about the importance of honesty and integrity in building strong communities. The irony was so perfect that I almost laughed out loud. I walked directly to the microphone at the back of the hall, the one reserved for questions from the audience during the presentation. Emma saw me moving and smiled, probably assuming I was going to offer some supportive comment about the Foundation's work or her leadership. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the museum's sound system. "I have a question about integrity." Emma's smile wavered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, Ryan. What would you like to know?" "I'd like to know how someone who's been conducting a secret affair for 2 years, who destroyed an innocent man's career to cover up her own infidelity, and who tried to manipulate me into a marriage, based on lies, can stand up there talking about the importance of honesty." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the air conditioning system humming in the background. Emma's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, shock, denial, and finally a kind of panic as she realized what was happening. "Ryan, I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice had lost its confident tone. Tyler stepped forward from where he'd been waiting near the side entrance, a folder of documents in his hands. "Actually, Emma, I think you know exactly what he's talking about." The appearance of Tyler sent a ripple of whispers through the crowd. Many of these people had been at our wedding, and they recognized him immediately as the man Emma had chosen. Over me at the altar, "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. 3 weeks ago, you all witnessed what you were told was a moment of wedding day panic. Emma's parents assured everyone that their daughter had simply been overwhelmed by pre-ceremony, now jitters, and had made a mistake she immediately regretted. I gestured toward Tyler, who was now walking toward the stage with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. But Tyler Brooks here has some interesting evidence about the real nature of his relationship with Emma Hayes. Evidence that shows their connection wasn't a spur-of-a-moment confession, but a calculated affair. That's been going on for years. Emma looked desperately toward her parents' table, but Robert and Patricia Hayes looked as stunned as everyone else in the room. This wasn't part of any script they'd prepared for. "Tyler," I called out, "would you like to share some of those emails with everyone? The ones where Emma was planning romantic getaways while she was engaged to me? Or maybe the text messages where she was complaining about having to pretend to be happy in our relationship?" Tyler reached the microphone and pulled out his phone, which was connected to the museum's projection system through a cable. I'd arranged with the audiovisual technician earlier that afternoon. Within seconds, Emma's own words were displayed. On screens throughout the hall, messages that left no doubt about the depth and duration of her relationship with Tyler. "This one's from 6 months ago," Tyler announced, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. Emma writes, I can't keep pretending that planning this wedding is making me happy. Every detail reminds me that I'm marrying the wrong person. But Ryan's been through so much, and his parents are so excited, and your parents have invested so much money. I don't know how to get out of this without destroying everyone." The crowd's murmur was growing louder, a mixture of shock, fascination, and social embarrassment at being witnesses to such a public revelation. Several people were already taking photos with their phones, ensuring that this moment would be preserved and shared far beyond the museum's walls. Emma finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate plea rather than the confident denial she'd probably planned. "Ryan, please, you're misunderstanding everything. Those messages were taken out of context, were they?" I asked, walking closer to the stage. "Tyler, show everyone the email where Emma asks you to help her figure out how to call off the wedding without admitting the real reason." Another message appeared on the screens. This one dated just 2 weeks before our wedding day. "Tyler, I need your help. I can't marry Ryan, but I can't tell him why without destroying him completely. He saved my life, and everyone expects me to be grateful forever. But gratitude isn't love, and I can't spend the rest of my life pretending it is. Is there any way to make this look like his decision instead of mine?" The reaction from the crowd was immediate and visceral. These were people who valued reputation and social standing above almost everything else. And watching Emma's carefully constructed image crumble in real time was both horrifying and fascinating to them. Robert Hayes finally found his voice and stood up from his table. "This is enough," he bellowed, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "Security, escort these men out immediately." But I wasn't finished yet. "Before security arrives, let me share one more thing with everyone," I called out, pulling out my own phone. "Emma, would you like to explain to your parents and all their friends why you had Tyler fired from his job and blacklisted throughout Portland's marketing industry?" Emma's composure finally shattered completely. "You don't understand," she said, tears starting to stream down her face. "I had to protect my family's reputation. The wedding disaster was bad enough. But if people knew Tyler and I had been together for years, it would have destroyed everything we've built. So you destroyed Tyler's career instead," I said simply. "And then you tried to manipulate me into a marriage that would give you social respectability while you figured out how to eventually reunite with the man you actually wanted." The museum's security team was finally approaching, but the damage was already done. Every major social media platform in Portland was buzzing with photos, videos, and commentary about the Hayes family's charity gala meltdown. The story was spreading, faster than any traditional news outlet could have managed, reaching thousands of people who would never have heard about a simple wedding cancellation. As security escorted Tyler and me toward the exit, Emma collapsed into a chair on the stage, her midnight blue gown pooling around her like spilled ink. Her parents rushed to her side, but their concerns seemed more focused on damage control than genuine care for their daughter's emotional state. The last thing I heard as we left the museum was Robert Hayes demanding that everyone put away their phones and forget what they'd witnessed, as if he could somehow control information in the age of social media through sheer force of will. Outside in the cool Portland evening, Tyler and I stood on the museum steps, looking back at the chaos we'd created. Police cars were arriving, probably called by someone inside who thought this was some kind of criminal disruption rather than a public revelation of the truth. "So what happens now?" Tyler asked. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen, which was lighting up with notifications from news outlets, social media mentions, and messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. The story was already trending on local Twitter, and I could see that it was starting to spread beyond Portland as people shared the videos of our confrontation. "No," I said. "Emma and her family get to experience what it feels like when their reputation is destroyed by someone they trusted. And you and I get to start over somewhere new, with clean consciences and the satisfaction of knowing we told the truth." The police officers were approaching us now, but they seemed more curious than threatening. One of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, asked if we were the men who'd disrupted the charity event. "Officer," I said politely, "we didn't disrupt anything, we just provided some missing information about the guest of honor's character. Everything we shared was true, and we have the documentation to prove it." As we talked to the police, I could see people streaming out of the museum, many of them talking animatedly on their phones or staring at their screens. The Hayes family's carefully controlled social circle was buzzing with gossip, speculation, and the kind of scandal that would provide conversation material for months to come. Emma Hayes had wanted to use the charity gala to rehabilitate her image and demonstrate her family's continued social prominence. Instead, she'd provided the perfect stage for her own complete downfall, witnessed by everyone whose opinion she valued most. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's simply making sure the truth gets told to the right audience at the right time. The aftermath of the charity gala exposure was more spectacular than I could have imagined. Right by the next morning, the video of Emma's public meltdown had gone viral, not just in Portland, but across social media platforms nationwide. The hashtag charity gala scandal was trending, and news outlets from Seattle to San Francisco were covering the story of the real estate heiress who'd been exposed as a serial manipulator at her own family's fundraising event. Hayes and Associates faced immediate consequences. 3 major corporate clients canceled their contracts within 48 hours, citing concerns about the company's ethical standards and leadership integrity. The city's business community, which had once treated the Hayes family as untouchable pillars of respectability, suddenly began distancing themselves from the scandal. Emma's personal social media accounts, which had once showcased her curated lifestyle of charity work and professional success, became flooded with comments from people sharing their own stories of betrayal and manipulation. The woman who had carefully crafted an image as Portland's golden daughter became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing reputation over genuine relationships. Tyler called me 3 days after the gala with news that vindicated our decision to expose the truth. "Ryan, you're not going to believe this, but I just got a call from Thompson Marketing in Denver. They saw the news coverage and want to offer me a senior position. Apparently they've been following Hayes and Associates, its business practices for years, and always suspected something wasn't quite right about their family dynamics." The irony was perfect. Emma's attempt to destroy Tyler's career had ultimately led to him finding a better opportunity with a company that valued integrity over connections. Meanwhile, several Portland firms that had previously blacklisted him were quietly reaching out, hoping to distance themselves from the Hayes family's tainted reputation. My own life was transforming in ways I hadn't expected. Northwest Marketing Solutions, apparently eager to avoid any association with the scandal, offered me a promotion and a significant salary increase if I would stay and help manage their crisis communications for other clients. But I had different plans. Marcus Chen and I had been discussing starting our own marketing consultancy for months, focusing on small businesses and ethical practices rather than the corporate manipulation that seemed to dominate the industry. The publicity from the gala incident, strange as it sounds, had given us exactly the kind of visibility we needed to launch successfully. "People trust someone who's willing to tell the truth even when it costs them something," Marcus explained. As we worked on our business plan, every client who hires us will know they're getting honesty, not spin. 3 weeks after the gala, Emma made one final attempt to contact me. She showed up at my apartment at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, looking nothing like the polished socialite who'd once commanded rooms full of Portland's elite. Her hair was unwashed, her expensive clothes wrinkled, and her eyes had the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Ryan," she said when I opened the door, "I need to talk to you, please." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the same couch where we'd once planned our wedding, where her parents had tried to convince me to take her back, where I'd realized that everything I thought I knew about our relationship had been an illusion. "I know you hate me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "and I know I deserve it. But I need you to understand that I never meant for things to go this far." I waited for her to continue, curious to hear how she would try to reframe the destruction she'd caused. When I started seeing Tyler, it wasn't supposed to be serious. I was just confused about our future, about whether I was ready for marriage. And Tyler was there, and he understood me in ways that you never seemed to. The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. Even now, trying to apologize, Emma couldn't resist blaming me for her betrayal. But then, the wedding got closer, and I realized I couldn't go through with it. I tried to find a way out that wouldn't hurt you, but there wasn't one. And when Tyler suggested that maybe I should just be honest about my feelings, I panicked. So you decided to destroy his career instead? Emma's face crumpled, and she started crying with the kind of ugly, desperate sobs that come from someone whose carefully constructed world has completely collapsed. I didn't know what else to do. My parents were so angry about the wedding, and the business was suffering, and everyone was blaming me for humiliating the family. Tyler was the easiest target. It was the first completely honest thing she'd said since arriving. Not because she'd suddenly developed moral clarity, but because she no longer had the energy to maintain her usual manipulative facade. Emma, I said gently, did you ever actually love me? Even in the beginning? She looked up at me through her tears, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine remorse. I loved the idea of you. I loved how safe you made me feel, how much my parents approved of you after the accident. I loved that you were so devoted to me that I never had to worry about losing you. But you never loved me, I concluded. Tried to, she whispered. I really did try. After she left that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since standing at the altar of Grandview Country Club. Complete peace. Emma's final confession had released me from any lingering doubt about my decision to expose her manipulation. She had never loved me, had never even really seen me as a person rather than a convenient solution to her need for security and social approval. 6 months later, I was standing in the departure lounge at Portland International Airport, waiting to board a flight to Austin, Texas, where Marcus and I had decided to relocate our new business. The Southwest had better weather, lower costs, and most importantly, no connection to the Hayes family or their diminished social empire. As I waited for my boarding announcement, a news report on the airport television caught my attention. An associate's real estate had declared bankruptcy, unable to recover from the massive client losses and legal fees that had followed the charity gala scandal. Robert Hayes was being investigated by the State Real Estate Commission for ethical violations, and the family's Beaverton mansion was scheduled for foreclosure. Emma, according to the reporter, had left Portland entirely, reportedly moving to somewhere on the East Coast where her name wouldn't be immediately recognized. Tyler had thrived in Denver, earning recognition as one of the region's top marketing executives and recently announcing his engagement to a colleague who appreciated his honesty and integrity. My parents had eventually reached out to apologize, admitting that they'd been so blinded by the Hayes family's social status that they'd forgotten what actually mattered in a relationship. We'd had several difficult but necessary conversations about expectations, manipulation, and the difference between supporting your child and trying to control their choices. We raised you to be a good man, my mother had said during our last conversation. But then we tried to convince you to accept being treated badly by someone who didn't deserve your goodness. I'm sorry it took us so long to see that. As my flight began boarding, I reflected on how completely my life had changed in less than a year. The shy, accommodating man who'd stood at that altar willing to accept public humiliation rather than cause a scene had evolved into someone who understood that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to enable other people's destructive behavior. Emma had given me an unexpected gift that day at Grandview Country Club. By choosing Tyler so publicly and dramatically, she'd forced me to confront the reality of our relationship and my own willingness to accept less than I deserved. Her betrayal had been painful, but it had also been liberating. Walking onto the plane that would take me to my new life in Austin, I thought about the 500 wedding guests who'd witnessed my humiliation and later my vindication. Many of them had probably expected me to fade quietly into obscurity. After Emma left me, instead I'd demonstrated that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who ends up writing the final chapter of the story. The flight attendant smiled as I found my seat, and I realized I was smiling back genuinely for the first time in years. My new life was just beginning, built on a foundation of self-respect rather than other people's approval. And unlike my relationship with Emma, this foundation was solid enough to last. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.